5 hours after I said I do at a historic venue in downtown Boston, I was standing in my mother-in-law's Beacon Hill townhouse with my abusive ex and my new husband, and they were both smiling at me like I was the problem they'd teamed up to solve. She had just pulled out a leather folder with my name on it. Inside were my therapy notes, my journal entries, my triggers, a literal manual on how to break me, and she'd been teaching my husband to use it since our first date. I was trapped. But as she laid out their plan to have me committed, they failed to realize one crucial thing. I hadn't come here unprepared. I'd learned something in those 3 years since escaping my ex. How to fight back against people who think they own you. I hadn't come here to break, I came here for vengeance. She taught my husband how to control me, but she never taught him how to handle a woman who refused to stay broken. 5 hours earlier. At the reception, I finally felt safe. For 3 years since escaping my abusive ex, Vincent, David had been my gentle harbor, until I saw Eleanor pull him into a hug that lingered too long. His shoulders stiffened, his hand clenched into a fist, and for a split second his eyes darted to mine, conflicted, before he forced a smile. When she finally released him, he looked at me with an expression I'd seen before, on Vincent's face, the look of a man who was about to tell me what I could and couldn't do. Eleanor caught my eye across the room and smiled, not warm, knowing, the kind that says, I just planted a seed, and you have no idea what's about to grow. I crossed the room to David, keeping my voice light. What did your mom just whisper? David hesitated, too long. Then he offered a smile, forced, mechanical, and said something that made my stomach drop. She suggested we set up a joint account immediately, for transparency. She thinks your spending on the wedding was high. Ice ran down my spine. That tone, reasonable, concerned, that's exactly how control had started with Vincent. I asked why Eleanor was suddenly worried about my finances. David took my arm. His grip was too firm. He said, she just wants us to make smart decisions, together. I excused myself to the bathroom, hands shaking. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I'd blocked 3 years ago. Vincent. The message read, Eleanor says it's time we all talked. I'll be at her place in Beacon Hill at midnight. Don't try to run, Sarah. We both know how that ends. My vision blurred. Eleanor didn't just contact Vincent, she invited him. I'd never told David the details of that abuse, not the broken ribs, not the 5 years of being told I was unstable. The only way Eleanor knew was if she'd been digging. I found Eleanor near the gift table. When she saw me, she turned her phone screen toward me deliberately. A photograph. Me and Vincent from 4 years ago. His arm around my waist. My smile was forced and brittle. Eleanor's voice was syrup-sweet. Vincent sent me these, such a charming man. We had a lovely conversation about your relationship. He had such interesting insights about what makes you tick. She said that last word like a threat, like she'd finally found the instruction manual for how to break me. I looked across the room at David. He wasn't watching me like a concerned husband. He was watching me like a student studying a problem he'd been taught to solve. And suddenly the pieces clicked. David had started asking where I was going. He'd suggested I quit my job. He'd bought me new clothes, saying he loved seeing me in things he chose. These weren't simple compromises. They were the exact tactics Vincent had used. Slower, more patient, more sophisticated. Eleanor hadn't whispered wedding advice to David. She'd whispered the playbook. I grabbed Eleanor's arm, not gently. What did you tell David about me? Eleanor's smile widened. She leaned close. I told him the truth, that you're fragile, that you need structure, that men like Vincent understood how to keep you stable, and David could learn the same techniques, for your own good. My voice came out as a whisper. You've been coaching him, teaching him to control me. Eleanor patted my hand like I was a child. I'm teaching him to protect you, from yourself. You just found a softer cage. David can give you that, with my guidance. Then I looked down at her phone screen. The photo was part of a larger folder. The label was stark. Sarah, Behavioral Patterns Triggers. Eleanor had built a profile on me, My triggers, my fears, my weaknesses, and she'd been feeding it to David for months. I thought back to our courtship. How fast he'd moved, how perfect he'd seemed. What if David had just been following a script Eleanor had written? Eleanor checked her watch. Come to my house after the reception, midnight. I'll explain everything. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Sarah? Vincent is coming too. It's time for a family meeting. I made a decision in that moment. I walked to the coat check, grabbed my purse, and discreetly activated the voice recorder on my phone, slipping it into my pocket. If Eleanor wanted a meeting, I'd give her one. But this time I wasn't going in blind. David and I drove through Beacon Hill in silence. The gas lamps cast shadows across the brick sidewalks. Every few minutes, he glanced at me with that new expression, calculating, assessing. Vincent's car was already parked outside Eleanor's Victorian townhouse, one of the most expensive addresses in Boston. My hands started shaking. David noticed. He grabbed my wrist, his grip too tight, and said, "You're okay. Mom knows what she's doing. This is good for us." I pulled away. "Why is Vincent here?" David's jaw tightened. "Mom thinks closure would help. Help us move forward without your past interfering." That's when I knew for certain. David wasn't a victim. He was a willing participant. Eleanor's living room was arranged like a therapy session. 4 chairs in a circle, wine already poured, original artwork on the walls, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the historic street. Vincent sat in one chair looking exactly as I remembered, confident, smug, dangerous. Eleanor started immediately. "Sarah, I'm a behavioral psychologist. I've practiced in Boston for 20 years. I consult for some of the most prestigious families in the city, and in that time, I've learned something important. Women like you need structure, boundaries." Vincent understood that. David is learning the gentle dominance protocol. My voice came out flat. "You mean I need to be controlled?" Vincent leaned forward, nodding. "That's exactly right, Sarah. You're chaos without structure. We're doing you a favor." Eleanor smiled. "I mean you thrive when your partner takes the lead. Let me show you what I've compiled." Eleanor pulled out a leather folder and handed it to David. "Everything's here. Sarah's triggers, response patterns, discipline strategies, reward systems. Think of it as a manual." David opened it. I watched his eyes scan the pages, my therapy notes, private journal entries, texts, my confidential medical file. I stood up fast. "How did you get my medical notes? This is illegal. You've been stalking me, and I know you bribed someone in my therapist's office. That's a HIPAA violation and criminal fraud." Eleanor's voice stayed calm. "I hired a private investigator. Perfectly legal when there's cause for concern, and your instability was concerning from the moment David brought you home." My mind raced. This went back years. I looked at David. "When did you tell your mother about me?" Eleanor answered for him. "He didn't have to. I introduced you." The room tilted. "What?" Eleanor's smile was triumphant. "That coffee shop on Newbury Street? The one near your therapist's office? The one you went to every Tuesday at 3 p.m.? I'd been watching you for 3 weeks. I knew your schedule. I knew you'd be vulnerable, freshly traumatized from your sessions. So I sent David." I turned to David. "Tell me she's lying about the HIPAA violation." David finally looked at me. "She's not. But Sarah, everything after was real. I fell in love with the person I thought I was protecting. After your mother profiled me like a criminal," I said. "After she told you exactly how to manipulate me." Eleanor nodded. "And now that we're all honest, David will implement the protocols. Vincent can advise when needed. You'll be stable, safe, taken care of." I stood in that living room surrounded by 3 people who thought they owned me, and I felt something shift. 3 years ago, I would have crumbled. But 3 years of therapy, 3 years of rebuilding, that changed me. I pulled out my phone. "You made one mistake. You told me everything. The stalking, the profiling, the engineered meeting, the manipulation manual, and I've already sent it all to someone who believes me." Eleanor's face went pale. David lunged for my phone. "Sarah, don't—" I stepped back. "I will walk out that door and send the rest, the folder, the photo, the evidence of your criminal fraud, to every lawyer and journalist I can find. You stalked me, you violated my privacy. That's criminal in this state." Eleanor's composure returned like ice. "You send that recording. You lose David. You lose everything. You go back to being alone, traumatized, struggling. Is that what you want?" She walked toward me slowly. "Or delete the recording. Stay married. Accept the structure that will keep you safe." Vincent added, "You were happier with me before you started resisting, Sarah." I felt the familiar pull, the voice that whispered, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm broken." It was the same voice that had kept me with Vincent for 5 years. Then I looked at David. Really looked at him. He wasn't Vincent. He was worse. Vincent had been honest about who he was, but David had weaponized my healing, turned my vulnerability into a blueprint. I said the words that would change everything. "I'm not deleting anything, and I'm not staying." Eleanor's voice turned ice cold. "Then we'll destroy you. I have documentation showing you're unstable. David will testify you've threatened self-harm. Vincent will corroborate. We'll have you committed before you blink." She pulled out her phone. "I already have the paperwork. One call to my colleague at McLean Hospital, and you're on a 72-hour hold. No proof, no lawyers, no escape. You have 60 seconds to decide." I looked at Eleanor's confident face and realized she'd made this threat too soon. She'd shown her hand before securing my evidence. That meant she was truly afraid. I steadied my voice. "You said you're a licensed psychologist. Then you know that secretly profiling someone, surveilling them, creating a manipulation manual without consent, violates ethical codes. You could lose your license. Everything." Eleanor's smile didn't waver. "It's your word against mine. You have no proof." I held up my phone. "I don't need the recording for this. I need a single call." I paused for effect. "Admitting you hired a private investigator to stalk me is harassment. But how did you get my therapy notes? You bribed someone in my therapist's office. That's a hyper-violation and criminal fraud." David's face went white. "Mom, you said this was legal." Eleanor cut him off. "Be quiet, David." But David wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the folder, at my private medical information. His voice came out strangled. "How did you get her therapy notes?" Eleanor's calm cracked. "I did what I had to do to protect you. She was going to ruin your life. She's damaged. I was trying to give you the tools to fix her before it was too late." The mask was off. What stood in front of me was someone who genuinely believed she had the right to engineer people's lives. Vincent shifted uncomfortably. "Eleanor, maybe we should—" Eleanor spun on him. "Don't back out now. You called me 6 months ago. You told me Sarah had found someone new. You provided half this information." I looked at Vincent. "You contacted her? You started this." Vincent looked uncomfortable. "I was worried about you. When I found out you were dating Eleanor's son, I thought maybe she could help. Give him guidance, make sure you didn't spiral." I laughed bitterly. "You stalked me, found out who I was dating, and created this manipulation scheme. Because you cared." David stood up abruptly. "This is insane." He looked at me with something like horror. "Sarah, I didn't know about the therapy notes. I didn't know Mom had bribed someone for your medical records. She told me it was just research." Eleanor's voice was sharp. "David, no!" His voice cracked. "You told me I was protecting her, but this—" He gestured at the folder. "This is stalking, and I've been following a playbook designed to control you. I thought I was being careful, but I was doing exactly what Vincent did, just slower." The room went silent. Eleanor's plan was unraveling. Eleanor's composure returned like ice. "It doesn't matter. Sarah won't use that recording." She looked at me with certainty. "Because I'll make sure Vincent files a restraining order for harassment, for stalking him." She pulled out a document. "I've prepared his testimony, how Sarah's been contacting him for months, how she married David to make him jealous, how she's unstable, dangerous. Vincent will sign, won't you?" She turned to Vincent. "You owe me $30,000, the loan I gave you last year. Sign the testimony or I'll sue you for every penny." Vincent picked up the pen with shaking hands. I watched Vincent's hand hover. Eleanor had leverage over everyone, David through manipulation, Vincent through debt, me through fear. But she'd forgotten one crucial thing. I looked at her and said, "You're right. I won't use the recording, because I've already shared the information from the car while David was driving here." Eleanor's smile froze. "You're bluffing." I pulled up my phone. I showed her the sent message. "To Dr. Reeves, my therapist, the one you bribed. I sent her everything 20 minutes ago. From the car, while David was driving here. By the time we walked through that door, Dr. Reeves had already contacted the state licensing board and filed a police report. I told her exactly how you obtained my confidential files. I sent her the evidence of the bribery and the folder screenshots." Eleanor's face drained of color. "She's bound by patient confidentiality." I cut her off. "About my treatment, not about crimes committed against me. When I told her you paid someone in her office to copy my files, she had a legal obligation to report you. To the licensing board, to the police." My phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. "That's her now. She's with a detective. They want to talk to you about the bribery, the stalking, and the unlawful surveillance. And about perjury, because that false testimony Vincent was about to sign? Dr. Reeves has my phone records. I haven't contacted Vincent once in 3 years." Vincent dropped the pen like it was on fire. Eleanor stood perfectly still. Her empire was collapsing. Then something shifted in her face. Pride. She couldn't help herself. "You think this is over? You're not the first. I've been running this practice for 7 years. Other women, vulnerable girls who need structure. I've made millions teaching the gentle dominance protocol to Boston's elite families." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to something almost reverent. "And you know what's beautiful? Most of them think their partners are just being protective, just like you did. They have no idea they're following my protocols. That's the art of it, making control look like care." She smiled. "I'm saying I perfected this. 15 active cases right now. 15 women whose partners are implementing my protocols. You can't stop all of them. You can't even find them all." I felt sick. But I also felt something else. Certainty. Because the phone I'd grabbed at the coat check wasn't just recording, it had been on an open line since the moment I walked into this house. I'd called 911 from the car, told them I suspected I was being lured into a dangerous situation, asked them to track my phone. They'd been listening for 20 minutes. Sirens wailed in the distance. 2 detectives burst through Eleanor's front door. They'd heard every word of her confession, the manipulation manual, the stalking admission, the bribery admission, Eleanor's boast about 15 other victims, Vincent's coercion, all of it. The lead detective looked at Eleanor. "Eleanor Mitchell, you're under arrest for stalking, unlawful surveillance, bribery, conspiracy to commit fraud and racketeering." Eleanor's face remained blank. No tears, no emotion, just cold calculation. Even now she believed she'd done nothing wrong. Vincent, seeing the handcuffs, started talking immediately, offering testimony for immunity. He told them everything. How Eleanor had contacted him 6 months ago, how she'd paid him $5,000 for information about me, how they'd planned tonight's intervention to coerce me into compliance. The detective asked David about his involvement. David told the truth. "I knew she'd researched Sarah. I thought it was public information. I didn't know about the bribery or stolen medical records. She told me she was teaching me trauma-informed partnership skills. I didn't realize I was learning manipulation tactics." The detective made notes. David wasn't being arrested, but his ignorance wasn't innocence either. As Eleanor was led toward the police car, she looked at me one last time. Her voice was eerily calm. "This wasn't my first project. When my lawyer gets these charges reduced to misdemeanors, I'll go right back to my practice. There will always be women who need guidance and men willing to pay for the blueprint. You can't stop me." But she was wrong. 2 weeks later, I sat in a conference room with 5 other women, all Eleanor's victims. Jessica had found a manipulation manual in her husband's desk. Priya had discovered recordings her boyfriend made of their arguments, sent to Eleanor for coaching. Maria's fiancé had a folder just like mine. We weren't alone, and now we had proof. When detectives searched Eleanor's Beacon Hill office, they found case files, surveillance reports, payment records showing she'd charged clients between $50,000 and $200,000 for her protocols. The prosecutor told us Eleanor's charges had been upgraded. Multiple counts of stalking, bribery, unlawful surveillance, racketeering, because she'd operated a criminal enterprise. And with my recording, Vincent's testimony, and the evidence from her office, conviction was almost certain. I didn't hesitate when they asked if I'd testify. When do we start? After Eleanor's arrest, after Vincent gave his statement, David and I stood in that massive, cold townhouse. He looked at me with swollen eyes. "I'm so sorry. I was stupid. Blind. She told me she was helping." I kept my distance. "You participated, David. You followed her instructions. You started monitoring my spending, my schedule, my friends. You might not have known about the illegal parts, but you knew you were controlling me." His voice broke. "I thought I was protecting you." I cut him off. "That's what Vincent used to say. That control was care. I can't stay married to someone who thinks I need to be managed." I called my lawyer at 3 a.m. I'd warned her weeks ago that something felt wrong. She'd been waiting. I asked her to file for annulment, fraud. David had married me under false pretenses, following a manipulation script. That wasn't a real marriage, it was a con. David didn't fight it. "Where will you go?" "Back to my apartment in Cambridge, the one I kept. The one you tried to convince me to give up last month." David flinched. "Mum said keeping it showed you weren't committed." I picked up my purse, still in my wedding dress. She was right. I didn't trust you. Turns out my instincts were smarter than my hope. I walked out of Eleanor's townhouse at dawn and drove across the river to Cambridge. Then I went to that coffee shop on Newbury Street, where I'd met David, where Eleanor had engineered everything. I sat in my car and let myself feel it all: anger, betrayal, grief. But underneath, relief, because I'd seen the trap, and I'd gotten out before the cage closed. My phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Reeves. "The State Licensing Board has suspended Eleanor's practice pending investigation. I've been contacted by 4 other women who filed complaints. You weren't alone, Sarah, and because of you, we can help the others." 4 women. Maybe more. All of us targeted because someone decided we needed to be fixed, all surviving the same manipulation. I texted back, "I want to help, however I can." Then I made a decision. This wasn't over. Eleanor's arrest was just the beginning. I was going to find every woman she'd targeted, every victim, and I was going to make sure she never destroyed another person again. Eleanor's trial lasted 4 months at the Boston courthouse. The courtroom was packed, media everywhere. Boston psychologist accused of teaching men to abuse partners. I sat in the witness stand in a simple blue dress and told everything. Eleanor's lawyer tried to break me. "Isn't it true you have a history of instability, that you fled from a previous relationship?" I looked him in the eye. "Yes, I fled from an abusive relationship. That's not instability. That's survival." "Isn't it possible Eleanor was genuinely trying to help?" I didn't flinch. "Eleanor obtained my confidential medical records through bribery. She hired someone to surveil me without my knowledge. She created a psychological profile and used it to teach my husband how to control me. That's not help, that's predatory behavior." The courtroom went silent. When Eleanor took the stand, she was composed, perfectly dressed, perfectly calm. These women needed structure. They were chaotic, traumatized, unable to maintain healthy relationships. I provided their partners with tools to create stability. I've spent 20 years building a practice serving Boston's most prominent families. The prosecutor leaned forward. "Did you obtain Sarah Mitchell's medical records through bribery?" Pause. "I obtained information through alternative means." "Did you engineer her meeting with your son at a coffee shop on Newbury Street?" Another pause. "I facilitated an introduction." "Did you teach your son techniques to isolate, monitor, and control her?" Eleanor's mask cracked. "I taught him to protect her. These women don't know what's good for them. They run from structure, from men who want to help. Someone has to teach them." She stopped, realized what she'd said. The prosecutor smiled. So you believe these women need to be taught, controlled, that they can't make their own decisions. Eleanor's silence was everything. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the forewoman read, "Guilty on all counts: stalking, bribery, unlawful surveillance, criminal conspiracy, racketeering." Eleanor's face remained blank, no emotion. She still believed she'd done nothing wrong, that she'd been helping. The judge sentenced her to 15 years in prison, $3 million in fines, permanent revocation of her psychology license. He looked at her. "Ms. Mitchell, you took an oath to help people. Instead, you weaponized psychology to destroy them. You preyed on vulnerable women and taught their partners to do the same. There is no justification." Eleanor was led away in handcuffs. She didn't look back. 6 months after the trial, I sat in a circle with 12 women at a community center in Cambridge, all Eleanor's victims. We met weekly, supporting each other. Jessica had gotten her job back and reconnected with her family. Priya was dating again, carefully but with hope. Maria had won a civil lawsuit against Eleanor. When it was my turn, I said, "I used to think escaping Vincent was my defining moment, but exposing Eleanor, standing in that courtroom and refusing to be silenced, that changed me. I'm not just a survivor, I'm someone who fights back." The women nodded. We all understood. We'd been told we were broken, and we'd proven we were actually dangerous to anyone who tried to control us. 1 year after my wedding, I stood in the same coffee shop on Newbury Street where I'd met David, the trap Eleanor had set. But I wasn't there to remember the manipulation. A woman had reached out after seeing news about the trial. She said her boyfriend's mother was acting strangely, asking invasive questions, offering unsolicited advice, making her feel broken. She wanted to know if she was paranoid. I bought her coffee and told her, "You're not paranoid. Trust your instincts. If something feels like control, it probably is." We talked for 2 hours. I gave her resources, warning signs, ways to protect herself. By the end, she was crying, from relief. Someone believed her. As I walked to my car, I saw Vincent across the street. He'd been released after cooperating with prosecutors. When he saw me, he started to approach, then stopped. The look on my face told him everything he needed to know. I wasn't afraid anymore, and he no longer had power over me. He turned and walked away. I realized something in that moment. Eleanor had tried to trap me in that coffee shop, but I'd transformed it, made it a place where I helped other women recognize manipulation before the cage closed. Eleanor thought she was teaching men how to control women, but what she actually did was teach me, and dozens of others, how to recognize control so completely that we'd never fall for it again. 3 years ago, I escaped Vincent by running in the middle of the night. 1 year ago, I escaped David by standing my ground and fighting back. Today, I was helping other women escape before they ever needed to run. That was the real victory. Not the trial, not Eleanor's prison sentence, but this, knowing my worth, trusting my instincts, and refusing to let anyone make me doubt myself again. Eleanor had tried to engineer my life, control my marriage, break me down and rebuild me as something manageable, but she accidentally created her worst nightmare, a woman who understood exactly how predators think, and who would spend the rest of her life making sure they never won again. Some people inherit money. Some inherit power. I inherited something better, the knowledge that I was never the problem. The control was, the manipulation was. The people who told me I needed to be fixed, they were. And that inheritance, no one can ever take it away. If you've ever felt like someone was trying to control you, if you've ever doubted your instincts because someone told you that you were too sensitive or unstable, I want you to know something. You're not crazy, you're not broken, and you deserve relationships built on respect, not management. This story isn't just mine. It belongs to every person who's been told they need to be fixed. Every person who's been manipulated into thinking control was love. Your instincts are valid, your boundaries matter, and anyone who tries to convince you otherwise is showing you exactly who they are. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe. I share stories often, stories about people who refused to be controlled, who fought back, and who won. Hit that subscribe button and join a community of people who know their worth. And if you're currently in a situation that feels like what I described, if someone is monitoring you, isolating you, making you question your reality, please reach out to a friend, a therapist, a hotline. You're not alone, and you're stronger than they want you to believe. Trust yourself. You're the expert on your own life. Thank you for listening to my story. I'll see you in the next one.